So we're going through some turmoil in the markets today. And I remember in 1907, there was a financial meltdown in the U.S. markets. It looked like the U.S. economy is going to collapse. And J.P. Morgan brought together some of the top business people in the country, and they all sat down. And he sat down and he wrote a check. This is in 1907 for $500 million to stabilize the U.S. economy. One man, one financier by himself did it. Now, it's not possible today, but he was asked by the journalist, Mr. Morgan, what's the market going to do? And he said, well, he said, I've given this considerable thought. He said, and I have concluded that the market will fluctuate. And this market will fluctuate. We're going through some very interesting times now. Whenever you have a long period of time, you go through a hangover period, which is what we're going through now, because of too much debt in too many different ways. And it all has to flush itself out of the system. But our market will stabilize. There's still 300 million people who need to eat and drink and go to work and school and have their teeth taken care of. And so business is going to be good in the future. We just have to stay calm. It's really easy to stay calm when everything's calm. It's when things are a little bit turbulent that you need to stay calm. You just take a deep breath and just be cool. Epictetus once said, the Greek philosopher, he said that circumstances do not make the man, they merely reveal him to himself. And so it is not circumstances that make our character, it is how we respond to those circumstances. And all throughout life we'll have problems and difficulties. Anybody here have any problems, by the way? Yeah. Well, it's the way that we deal with our problems, the way that we respond to them. We cannot control the problems. In fact, what we know is life is a continuous succession of problems. Life is I should never have said anything, you know. The guy back there is mad at me now. He's pissed, you know. He's going to keep those lights going up and down for the next hour and a half. Anyway. They say life is a continuous succession of problems, and the only break in this continuous succession of problems is the occasional crisis. And because we're living active lives, according to the numbers, you'll have a crisis about every 2 to 3 months. You'll have a family crisis, or a financial crisis, or a practice crisis, or a physical crisis, but you'll have a crisis about every 2 to 3 months. Which means that, by the way, that everybody in this room is either in a crisis right now, or has just gotten out of a crisis, or just about to have a crisis. So and the only thing you can do is to deal with the crisis effectively. And so how you respond to what happens to you in life is really the critical factor. So I have to ask you a question, is what is the most important, highest paid work in America? Well, if you follow what Ed teaches you, it sure can be. The highest, most important work, it's kind of a trick question, is thinking. Thinking is the most important work that we do. Thomas Edison said, thinking is the hardest work of all. That's why most people would rather think. And yet thinking is the most important thing you do, because the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your decisions. The quality of your decisions determines the quality of your actions. The quality of your actions determines the quality of your results. And of course, your results determine the quality of your life. In business, the bottom line of everything is results. And the question is, does it work? And does it work, and how well does it work, and how well does it work in comparison with other things? So in business, you have one central focus and one question. Does it work, and how well does it work? We say when we talk about business, how much in, how much out, how fast, how sure. Those are the 4 questions that you always ask. And so thinking has the most important results because of one word, and it's one of my favorite words in time management. It's the word consequences. And consequences is a great word because something is important to the degree to which it has potentially serious consequences. Something is unimportant to the degree to which it has low or no consequences. Now you can always tell important people, because what do important people work on? Things that have potentially important consequences. You'll find that unimportant or unsuccessful people are people who work on things that have low or no consequences. You take the 80-20 rule, which I've studied all my life as you have. Why is it the top 20% make 80% of the money? Top 10% make 90%. Now here's the interesting thing, is that life is very much like a marathon. We all start off at the same line, we're all ready to go, and we start running, and everybody's got pretty much the same abilities and the same opportunities. We go to the same schools, we go to the same colleges, and yet some people get way, way ahead, the mass stay in the middle, and some people fall so far behind they think they're first. And so why is this? And well, this has been studied for year after year, and we find that there's one single difference. It's the way you think. I was listening to somebody who grew up in a small town, and he was talking about this interesting point. He said he came from a poor family, and there were 3 families in that town that owned everything. They owned the mill, and they owned the factory, and they owned the general store, and they owned the shipping, and they owned the trucking, and they owned the agricultural processing. They owned everything. And these 3 families were rich. They had beautiful homes. Everybody revered them and talked about them, and they were on the bank boards and everything else. And he went to school with the kids from these 3 families, and you know, everybody wanted to be their friends. Of course, you remember those days. And he found that they were quite normal kids. They weren't very different from anybody else. But somehow these families owned everything. And it was a real shock to him. It wasn't their education, because they weren't getting a better education than he was. They weren't the grades, because the grades were the same. It certainly wasn't their physical attractiveness or anything else. It was just one thing, is they thought differently. They had an attitude of looking for opportunities and possibilities. And what we have found, the series of articles in Inc. magazine, they were interviewing people who'd become fabulously successful, rags to riches stories. Every one of them said, the only reason I succeeded is because I developed the habit of always looking for the opportunity, always looking for something good or positive in what I was doing. Whereas other people, they have a setback and go, oh my God, wah, 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 and they go home and drink and watch television and so on. But successful people are always looking for the opportunity. They think differently. And so when you learn to think better, you make better decisions, you get better results. Interesting question, by the way, which comes first, thought or emotion? Well, the answer is thought comes first, because according to the University of Pennsylvania, the way you translate something determines how you feel about it. If you translate an event as being a positive event, you know, some people can be going out with a complete jerk, and the jerk breaks up with them and stomps out. And they can say, wow, fabulous, saves me all the problem of doing it. The other person can be decimated and depressed and everything else. Same event, different interpretation. So what they found is the way you interpret or explain things to yourself largely determines how you feel about them. And if you look for the good in everything, if you look for the valuable lesson, if you look for the possibilities, surprise, surprise, you always find something good or something valuable. So how you think is everything. Now here's a good question. What is the role of words in human life? Come on, so this is an easy one. The tough ones come later, okay? What do we use words for? Come on. To communicate. And that was my answer. A psychologist asked me this question, what do we use words for? And I said, to communicate. He said, yes, but there's more than that. He said, a word, he said, is a condensed thought. And a word contains many meanings. Some words can be very rich with meaning and all kinds of interpretations. Take a word like family, as it applies to yourself. Take a word like love, or children, or home, or take a word like freedom, or financial independence, you know, or success. These words are rich words. There's libraries full of books written on these individual subjects. So what they did, starting about more than 50 years ago, is they began just testing this thesis and testing people on how many words they could recognize. Like pays to increase your word power from Reader's Digest. Did you ever read that? And you read it through and you're a little bit kind of disappointed that you missed half of them? You know, you ever had that experience? Wow. Well, what they did is they took people and they just analyzed how many words out of the 4,000. By the way, if you want to know the 4,000 most common words in English, the words that they base the SAT on, the LSAT, all the great tests, you just go to the internet and put it on Google and say, 4,000 most common words, and bloop, there it is, and you print it up. And it's about 20 pages, and it just gives you the word and the word meanings. And if you know those words, it'll put you in the top 10%, 5% of Americans living today, just because you know the words. Anyway, so what they did is they tested people, and they asked them, how many words do you recognize? And then they sorted them by socioeconomic level. There's 7 socioeconomic levels in America, by the way. Even though we are an egalitarian society, all societies have hierarchies, and we have a hierarchy. They found the people that knew the lowest number of words were inner city dwellers, and they had an average vocabulary of 400 words. Now, the English dictionary has about 650,000 words, and they knew 400. And some of them were words that are not repeatable in a family publication, and they were used as verbs, nouns, adverbs, and adjectives. Anyway, so then they went to the next level, and they knew more, and they went all the way up, and they found that the people at the highest levels of society recognized the most words. So they said, well, let's test this as a thesis, and they took people out of corporations, people who had certain levels of management, and they just experimented for 1 year. They taught them 5 words a day. An average, say, 1,500 words in the course of a year, and watch what happens to their lives. Well, it was just astonishing. They learned the words so they could recognize them and use them. They were promoted 2 or 3 times. Their income went up 50 to 100%. They were moved up into management. Their social circle changed. The people they hung around with and wasted time with in the evenings changed it completely. They started to associate with people who had higher vocabularies, because you always tend to associate with people who have the same level of vocabulary as yourself. It's almost like cream rises. You start to rise like cream as your vocabulary increases. Now, why does this happen? It's because the more words you know, the better you can think, because you have more tools to think with. You can think with greater subtlety. You can analyze things better. You can make better decisions. So as you learn more words, you actually become smarter. And every brain cell, as you know, is connected to 22,000 other brain cells. So as you learn more words, you connect those with other words, which enable you to see things, to sense things, develops your intuition to a higher level, and it makes you more successful.